hell is this doing at my daughter's wedding? Do you have any idea who you are?
Gregory Caldwell didn't even look at her like a person.
Get it away from here now! Before it ruins every photo from tonight!
His hand waved at Whitney James the way you'd swat a fly off your dinner plate.
This is disgusting. I paid $250,000 for this weekend, and they let this walk around where my guests are eating.
He turned to his wife, his face twisted with revulsion.
Sir, I believe there's been a misunderstanding.
A misunderstanding? The only thing I misunderstood was that this place had standards.
She didn't flinch. She just smiled. Because every single acre this man was standing on, it was hers. Have you ever watched someone try to throw you out of a place you own? 6 hours earlier, the morning sun was barely up over Virginia's horse country. Whitney James drove her silver SUV down a 2-lane road lined with white oak trees. No driver, no entourage. Just a thermos of black coffee and a worn leather briefcase on the passenger seat. Classical music played low on the radio. Her window was cracked open. The smell of fresh-cut hay drifted in from the fields. This was her favorite part of the day, the quiet before everything started. She turned onto a gravel path that most people didn't even know existed. It led to a small stone cottage tucked behind a ridge of magnolia trees on the far east side of the property. This was her private home. No sign on the door, no name on the mailbox. That was by design. Whitney James was the sole owner of Ashford Hall, a 200-acre Georgian estate built in 1843. The main house had 14 bedrooms, hand-laid marble floors, and a ballroom with crystal chandeliers that caught the light like frozen rain. There were gardens, stables, a spring-fed lake, and a half-mile of white fence that curved along the Virginia countryside like a ribbon. It was one of the most exclusive wedding venues on the East Coast. A 12-month waiting list. 6 figures just to book a weekend. But here was the thing most people didn't know. Whitney's name never appeared on the website. It never showed up in any brochure or magazine feature. The estate operated under a trust called Ashford Heritage LLC. Clean, private, invisible. She inherited it from Eleanor Ashford, a white philanthropist with no living heirs who had mentored Whitney for over a decade. Eleanor saw something in her that most people overlooked. When Eleanor passed, she left everything to Whitney. Every acre, every chandelier, every cent. Whitney didn't announce it. She didn't do press. She simply stepped into ownership the same way she did everything else. Quietly, completely, and on her own terms. By 9 that morning, Ashford Hall was already buzzing. Florists carried armfuls of white peonies through the side entrance. A crew of 12 assembled a canopy near the lake. Caterers wheeled stainless steel carts across the stone courtyard. Today was the Caldwell wedding, the biggest event of the season. Gregory Caldwell had booked the estate 8 months ago through his event planner. He never spoke to Whitney directly. He never asked who owned the property. He simply wired $250,000 and expected perfection. And perfection was exactly what he was getting, until he decided to create his own chaos. Gregory arrived at noon with a convoy of black SUVs. He stepped out, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's rent for a year. His wife, Diane, followed. Then his daughter, Sloane, the bride, in a silk robe with her initials stitched in gold. From the moment his shoes touched the gravel, Gregory started giving orders. He snapped his fingers at a young black caterer carrying a tray of water glasses. Didn't use a name. Didn't say please. Just snapped and pointed at his table like the young man was a dog. You, water, now. He complained to Diane about the flower arrangements. Too many roses, not enough orchids. He told the string quartet to move 6 feet to the left because the sound was crowding his conversation area. Then he found Preston Moore, the estate's 62-year-old manager. Preston had worked at Ashford Hall for over 30 years. He knew every stone in every wall, and he knew exactly who signed his paychecks. Gregory looked Preston up and down and said, "This place could really use an owner who knows how to maintain standards. It's slipping." Preston's jaw tightened, his hand stayed at his sides. He said nothing, but his eyes drifted toward the east ridge, toward the cottage behind the magnolias, where the real owner of Ashford Hall was getting ready for her evening walkthrough. The same walkthrough she did at every major event. The same one that was about to change Gregory Caldwell's life forever. By 5 o'clock, the estate looked like something out of a magazine. Golden light poured across the lawn. The white tents glowed soft against the tree line. Candles flickered inside glass lanterns lining the stone walkway. The air smelled like gardenias and fresh linen. Guests began arriving in waves. Women in pastel gowns, men in tailored suits. Luxury cars lined up along the gravel drive like a dealership showroom. Valets in white gloves opened doors and directed traffic with quiet precision. Whitney watched from the window of her cottage. She'd changed into a simple cream dress, understated gold earrings, low heels. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. She smoothed the front of her dress and checked her reflection once in the hallway mirror. This was her routine. Every major event, she walked the grounds in the final hours, checked the catering, reviewed the timeline with staff, made sure everything ran the way Eleanor Ashford would have wanted. It was more than a business obligation. It was a promise she'd made to a woman who had trusted her with everything. She tucked her leather portfolio under her arm, stepped outside, and followed the stone path toward the main house. The heels of her shoes clicked softly against the old flagstone. The evening air was warm. Crickets hummed in the hedgerow. A breeze carried the faint sound of the string quartet tuning up near the lake. Somewhere behind the garden wall, a caterer laughed, and the sound carried across the open field like a bell. Whitney entered through the service door on the east wing. The kitchen was controlled chaos. Line cooks plating appetizers in neat rows, servers adjusting bow ties in front of a small mirror by the door. The head caterer barking timelines into a headset while checking temperatures on the warming trays. She stopped beside the catering supervisor, a woman named Ruth. "How's the timeline looking?" "Cocktail hour starts at 20. Dinner service at 7. We're on track." Whitney nodded. The Caldwell party requested a specific wine for the toast. Did it arrive? Case of 98 Bordeaux, already chilled and locked in the cellar. Good. And the dietary restrictions for Table 9? All handled. Gluten-free, nut-free, 2 vegan plates marked. Perfect. Let me know if anything shifts. That was Whitney. No drama, no ego, just precision. She ran this estate the way a surgeon runs an operating room. Every detail accounted for, every contingency mapped. She moved through the service corridor and stepped out onto the south lawn, where the cocktail hour was about to begin. She walked slowly, scanning table settings, checking the alignment of chairs, running her hand along a tablecloth to feel for wrinkles. She paused at the floral arrangements and adjusted a single peony that had tilted sideways in its vase. That's when Gregory Caldwell spotted her. He was standing near the fountain with Diane and 2 business associates, a glass of scotch in one hand, a cigar in the other. Smoke curled around his face in the amber light. He was mid-sentence, laughing at his own joke, when his eyes caught Whitney crossing the lawn. He stopped laughing. The smile dropped from his face like a mask falling off a shelf. His eyes followed her the way someone watches a rodent cross their kitchen floor. "Who is that?" he said. Diane looked over, squinted. "I have no idea. Staff, maybe?" "She doesn't look like a staff. And she's not on the guest list. I approved every name personally." He handed his scotch to Diane and started walking toward Whitney. His stride was stiff, purposeful, his shoulders squared. The kind of walk that said, "I own this moment and everyone in it." Whitney was adjusting a centerpiece on table 14 when his shadow fell across the flowers. "Excuse me," she looked up. "Yes? Who are you?" "I'm with the estate's management team, just doing a routine walkthrough before dinner service." Gregory's eyes dropped to her dress, then to her shoes, then to her earrings, then slowly back up to her face. He didn't try to hide what he was doing. He was measuring her, sorting her, cataloging her, deciding where she ranked. "Management," he repeated. The word came out like he'd bitten into something rotten. That's right. And you thought it was appropriate to just wander around in the middle of my event? Touching my tables? Rearranging my flowers? These walkthroughs are standard for events of this size, sir. I'm just making sure everything meets the estate's quality. I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked who gave you permission to be here. Whitney paused. She could feel the shift in the air between them. It wasn't polite anymore. It was tight, charged, like the moment before a thunderclap. I don't need permission, Mr. Caldwell. This is part of the estate's standard protocol. Gregory stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the scotch on his breath, close enough that his shadow swallowed hers on the grass. Let me make something very clear to you. I am paying $250,000 for this weekend. That means every single inch of this property belongs to me until Sunday morning. So unless you have an invitation with your name printed on it, you need to leave. Right now. Whitney held his gaze. She didn't blink. She didn't shift her weight. I understand your concern. I'll step aside and come back later to finish the walkthrough. She turned to walk away. Calm. Measured. Controlled. Giving him every possible chance to let this end cleanly. But Gregory Caldwell was not a man who let things end. Diane, are you seeing this? Diane walked over, her heels clicking sharply on the stone path. She looked at Whitney the way someone looks at a stain on white upholstery. Can I help you, sweetheart? Diane said. Her voice was honey poured over broken glass, sweet on the surface, razor sharp underneath. I was just leaving, Whitney said. That's probably best, honey, Diane said. She tilted her head with a thin smile. This event is for invited guests only, people who were actually asked to be here. I'm sure you understand. Whitney understood perfectly. She understood that Diane's smile never once reached her eyes. She understood that sweetheart was not a term of endearment. It was a leash. She understood exactly what both of them saw when they looked at her face. But she kept walking, steady, straight, dignified, giving them absolutely nothing to feed on. Then Gregory called out behind her, loud enough for every guest within 50 feet to hear. Hey! Hey! I'm talking to you! Don't you walk away from me! Whitney stopped. She didn't turn around. Her hand tightened on the portfolio. You don't walk away from me when I'm speaking. Not on a property I'm renting. Not in front of my guests. Not ever. She turned slowly. Every eye on the south lawn was now locked on her. 30, maybe 40 guests staring. Some are curious. Some were entertained. Some are visibly uncomfortable. A woman near the bar pressed her lips together and looked down at her glass. A man in a gray suit whispered something to his wife. No one spoke up. Not one. Gregory marched toward her. He was performing now, playing to his audience, feeding on the attention. Do you know what I think? He said, loud enough for the terrace to hear. I think you walked in here off the street. I think you saw the cars and the champagne and the fancy dresses and thought you'd slip in and help yourself to a nice evening. Am I wrong? That's not what happened, Mr. Caldwell. Then prove it. Show me an invitation. Show me a badge. Show me a single piece of paper that says you have any right to be standing on this lawn. I've already explained my role. You've explained nothing. You're trespassing on my event, and frankly, you're embarrassing yourself. He stepped up onto the terrace and raised his voice another full notch. He wanted the entire garden to hear this next part. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. It seems we have an uninvited visitor who doesn't quite understand what private event means. Nervous laughter from a cluster near the bar. A young woman looked at her date and mouthed, "Oh my God." An older couple near the fountain exchanged a glance but said nothing. The quartet stopped mid-phrase. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Gregory pointed at Preston Moore, who had just stepped out from the main house with a clipboard in his hand. Preston, escort this woman off the property. Immediately. Preston looked at Whitney. His face was a war. 30 years of loyalty pulled against every word he wanted to say. He knew who this woman was. He knew what she owned. He knew that Gregory Caldwell was standing on her land, drinking her wine, breathing her air. Whitney caught his eye across the terrace. She gave a small, almost invisible shake of her head. Not yet. Preston's hands curled into fists at his sides, his jaw locked. But he stayed quiet. He trusted her. He always had. Gregory turned back to Whitney. He took one step closer. His voice dropped, but not low enough. Everyone still heard him. I don't know where you came from. I don't care where you go. But you have exactly 60 seconds to walk yourself off this property before I call the police and have you dragged off like the trespasser you are. Are we clear? Whitney looked at him one last time. Her face was stone. Her eyes didn't waver. Her voice came out steady as a heartbeat. I'll leave for now, Mr. Caldwell, but I promise you, we will be speaking again. Very soon. Gregory snorted. He actually laughed. A short, ugly bark of a laugh. I seriously doubt that, sweetheart. He turned back to his guests, tugged the front of his jacket straight, and raised his glass high. Now then, where were we? I believe we have a wedding to celebrate. The laughter returned, hesitant at first, then louder. The quartet picked up their bows. The champagne kept flowing. The evening folded back over itself like nothing had happened. And Whitney James walked down the gravel path toward her cottage, alone, in the fading golden light. Her heels crunched softly on the stone. The crickets started up again around her. No one followed her. No one apologized. No one said a single word. Whitney hadn't even reached her cottage before her phone rang. Preston Moore's name flashed across the screen. She answered on the second ring. Whitney, I'm sorry. I should have said something out there. You did exactly what I needed you to do, Preston. That man has no idea who he just... I know. Let the evening play out. I'll handle it. She stepped inside her cottage. The door closed softly behind her. She set her portfolio on the kitchen table, poured a glass of water, took one long, slow breath. Her hands were steady, but something behind her eyes had shifted. A quiet calculation was forming, the kind that doesn't announce itself. She opened the portfolio. Inside was everything. The deed, the trust documents, the operating agreement for Ashford Heritage LLC, and the Caldwell rental contract. All 42 pages, including the termination clause on page 31. She didn't read it. She already knew every word. She closed the portfolio and looked out the window. Through the magnolia trees, the reception tents glowed amber. Music thumped faintly across the field. Laughter carried on the warm night air. Gregory Caldwell was out there celebrating, feeling like the most powerful man on 200 acres. He had no idea what was coming. Back at the reception, Gregory's mood was electric. The humiliation of the black woman had given him a surge of adrenaline. He was louder now, more animated. He clapped men on the back. He ordered another round of the 98 Bordeaux for the head table. But he wasn't done. Men like Gregory Caldwell don't just win. They have to make sure everyone knows they won. They replay it, relive it, squeeze every last drop out of the moment. He cornered Preston Moore near the kitchen entrance. Preston, that woman earlier, who was she? She's part of the estate's operations team. Operations? Gregory laughed. She was wandering around touching silverware like she owned the place. She was doing a standard event check. It's routine. Not anymore. Not this weekend. I don't want anyone on this property who isn't on my approved list. No exceptions. Especially not... He paused. Let the silence fill in the word he didn't say. You understand me? Preston understood perfectly. The word Gregory swallowed was louder than anything he'd said out loud. I'll note your preference, sir. Don't note it. Enforce it. Gregory leaned closer. His breath was sour with wine and cigar smoke. If I see her again, you're out of a job by Monday. Are we clear? Preston said nothing. His knuckles were white around the clipboard. Gregory patted his shoulder like they were old friends. Good man. Now get me another bottle of that Bordeaux. He walked away, whistling. An hour passed. The reception moved from cocktails to dinner. Plates of filet mignon circulated under silver cloches. Crystal glasses clinked. The string quartet transitioned to soft jazz. Gregory gave a toast that lasted 9 minutes. He talked about legacy, about standards, about protecting what's yours. Not a single word about love. After dinner, Gregory stepped onto the terrace to smoke. The night air was thick and warm. Fireflies blinked across the dark lawn like tiny broken signals. That's when he saw it. Whitney's cottage. The lights were on. He stared through the trees, the warm yellow glow behind the magnolias, a silhouette moving past a window. "She's still here," he muttered. His associate frowned. "Who?" "That woman. Still on the property." He pointed. "Right there. Maybe she lives on the grounds. Some estates have staff housing. I don't care if she lives in a tree." Gregory pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Diane asked from the doorway. "What I should have done an hour ago." He dialed 911. "Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser at Ashford Hall Estate. A black female, mid-30s to 40s, wearing a light-colored dress. She was confronted earlier and refused to leave. She was aggressive and refused to identify herself. I'm concerned for the safety of my guests." Every word was a lie. He said each one without blinking. Diane watched from the doorway. She didn't correct him. She didn't say Whitney had been calm. She didn't say Whitney had left quietly. She just sipped her champagne and went back inside. 12 minutes later, blue and red lights flickered through the tree line. Officer Dale Wilkins pulled his cruiser up the gravel drive. He was a local officer, mid-40s, had worked events at Ashford Hall before. But tonight, he'd been briefed by Gregory Caldwell first. Gregory met him at the gate. Firm handshake, confident posture. "Thank you for coming, officer. She's in that cottage. She was hostile, erratic. My wife felt unsafe." Wilkins nodded, took notes, didn't question a single detail. He drove toward the cottage, gravel crunching under his tires, radio crackling with static. Whitney was sitting at her kitchen table when headlights swept across her wall. Blue and red shadows danced across the ceiling. She set down her glass of water and waited. 3 hard knocks on wood. She opened the door. Wilkins stood on her porch, one hand on his belt. His flashlight beam hit her square in the face. "Evening, ma'am. I received a report of a trespasser. What are you doing here?" "I live here, officer. This is my residence." "You live here? On the estate grounds?" "That's correct." "Do you have identification?" She handed him her Virginia driver's license. He studied it under the flashlight. "What is your connection to the property?" "I'm part of the estate's management. I've lived here for several years." "Do you have documentation to prove?" A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps on gravel. Gregory had followed him. "Officer, why is she still standing there? She refused to leave. That's trespassing." Wilkins turned. "Sir, I'm handling—" "Search her car. Search the cottage. She has no right to be here." Wilkins looked at Whitney. "Ma'am, would you consent to a search of your vehicle?" "No, officer. Am I being detained?" Gregory stepped forward. "I know people in this county. The sheriff and I golf together. If you can't handle this, I'll find someone who can." Wilkins' shoulders tightened. The pressure of wealth pressed down on him like a physical weight. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside and wait by my vehicle." Whitney looked at him, looked at Gregory with his arms crossed and chin raised, looked at the blue and red lights painting her magnolia trees. She stepped out, walked to the cruiser, stood in the gravel with her hands at her sides while 2 men decided whether she was allowed to exist on her own property. Then Diane arrived, heels clicking down the path, flanked by 2 women from the wedding party. Their perfume arrived before they did. "Oh, honey," Diane said, hand on her chest. "Are you still here? Do you need someone to call you a ride?" One of her friends whispered, just loud enough. "Maybe she's with the catering company and got lost." They laughed, soft, polished, practiced. Whitney looked at Diane. She didn't speak. Her silence was louder than anything Diane had ever said. Then Preston Moore came down the path, walking fast, face flushed. "Officer Wilkins, this woman has every legal right to be here, more right than anyone here tonight." Gregory's head snapped. I told you to stay out of this. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Mr. Caldwell. One more word, Preston. One more word and you're finished. I'll have you blacklisted from every estate in Virginia. Preston looked at Whitney. His eyes were burning. She shook her head, barely visible. Not yet. Preston's fists clenched. A vein pulsed in his temple. But he stepped back. And Whitney stood there in the gravel, bathed in blue and red light, surrounded by people who assumed she was nothing. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just waited. Because the moment she decided this was over, it would be over. On her terms. Whitney stood by the cruiser for exactly 3 more minutes. She counted each one. Then she pulled her phone from the pocket of her dress. One call. That's all it would take. Terrence Blake answered on the first ring. He always did when Whitney called after dark. Tell me. She gave him the short version. 30 seconds. No emotion, just facts. Terrence was quiet for a beat. Then he said, I'll send everything to your phone right now. The deed, the LLC filing, the rental contract, all of it. Thank you, Terrence. And Whitney, you don't have to be gracious about this. Not tonight. Her phone buzzed 3 times in a row. 3 documents, 3 pieces of proof, 3 nails for a coffin Gregory Caldwell had built for himself. She looked at the screen, read each document header, then she locked the phone and slid it back into her pocket. She turned to Officer Wilkins, who was still standing by his cruiser, pretending to review his notes. Officer, I'd like to show you something now. She opened the first document on her phone and held it up to his face. The deed to Ashford Hall. 200 acres, every structure, every parcel, 1 name on the ownership line. Whitney James. Wilkins read it, then read it again. His flashlight hand dropped slowly to his side. Ma'am, I'm not finished. She opened the second document. The operating agreement for Ashford Heritage LLC. Sole member and managing director, Whitney James. Then the third. The Caldwell rental contract, signed 8 months ago. Page 31, section 12. Termination for cause, including, and she read this part out loud, conduct detrimental to the property, its staff, or its reputation, as determined solely by the owner. Wilkins took a full step back. His face had gone pale under the blue and red lights. I wasn't aware. No, you weren't, because you didn't ask. Whitney turned away from Wilkins. She looked up the gravel path toward the reception. The tents still glowed. The music still played. 300 people were still dancing on her land. She started walking. Not toward her cottage, not toward her car, toward the terrace. Preston Moore saw her coming first. He was standing near the kitchen entrance, arms crossed, watching the path. When he saw Whitney walking through the magnolia shadows with her portfolio in hand and her chin held level, he didn't say a word. He just fell into step beside her. They walked together across the south lawn. The grass was damp with evening dew. The lanterns cast long shadows at their feet. The sound of the reception grew louder with every step. Whitney climbed the terrace steps. Her heels clicked on the stone. The string quartet was playing something soft and sweet. Guests mingled with wine glasses in hand. The dessert course was being served. Gregory Caldwell was seated at the head table, Diane on his left, Sloane on his right. He was leaning back in his chair, laughing, holding a glass of cognac like a scepter. He didn't see Whitney until she was standing directly in front of his table. The laughter stopped. Diane's glass froze halfway to her lips. Sloane looked up with mascara-smudged eyes. Gregory stared at Whitney like he was seeing a ghost. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Whitney reached into her portfolio. She pulled out a single printed page. She placed it face up on the white tablecloth, right between the dessert plate and the cognac glass. Mr. Caldwell, my name is Whitney James. Her voice carried across the terrace like a bell, clear, calm, unbreakable. I am not a wedding crasher. I am not a trespasser. I am not someone who wandered off the street. She tapped the document with one finger. I am the sole owner of Ashford Hall. Every building, Every acre, every blade of grass you are sitting on right now belongs to me." The terrace went dead silent. 300 people holding their breath. Gregory looked down at the deed. His face drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. "Under Section 12 of your rental agreement, I have the right to terminate this contract immediately for conduct detrimental to the property and its staff." She paused. Let the silence do its work. "Your event is over, Mr. Caldwell. Your guests have 1 hour to vacate my property." Gregory's mouth moved. You can't. We paid. Your deposit will be refunded minus damages. 1 hour." Diane lunged forward. "Surely we can discuss this like—" "We're past discussion, Mrs. Caldwell. You made that very clear when you asked if I needed a ride home." Whitney turned to Preston. One nod. That's all it took. Preston Moore, the man Gregory had threatened to fire 2 hours ago, stepped forward and began directing staff to shut down the event. The catering team stopped service. The string quartet set down their bows. The lanterns along the walkway were extinguished one by one. Whitney looked at Officer Wilkins, who had followed her up from the cottage and was now standing at the edge of the terrace, hat in hand. She handed him a business card. "If Mr. Caldwell is not off my property in 60 minutes, officer, you'll be escorting him out. Are we clear?" Wilkins nodded. He couldn't meet her eyes. Sloane Caldwell sat at the head table in her white wedding gown. Tears ran silently down her face. She looked at her father. Gregory Caldwell had nothing to say. For the first time in his life, he had absolutely nothing to say. The silence on the terrace lasted exactly 11 seconds. It felt like a year. Then Gregory Caldwell did what desperate men always do. He tried to rewrite the last 5 minutes. "Now hold on, hold on." He stood up from the table. His chair scraped against the stone. "If I had known who you were, if someone had just told me." Whitney didn't turn around. "This is a misunderstanding. That's all this is. A simple misunderstanding." She still didn't turn around. Gregory took 3 quick steps toward her. His voice dropped, quieter now, almost pleading. "Miss James, Whitney, listen to me. I'll double the rental fee. Triple it. Name your price. I'll make a donation to whatever cause you support. Just let my daughter have her night, please." Whitney stopped walking. She turned slowly. She looked at Gregory Caldwell the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. "Mr. Caldwell, you didn't treat me like a misunderstanding. You treated me like garbage. In front of your guests, in front of the police, in front of your own daughter." She took 1 step closer. "You called the police and lied to them. You told them I was aggressive. You told them I was a threat. You wanted me removed from my own property like I was a stray animal." Her voice never rose above conversational volume. That was the terrifying part. "This isn't about money, and it's far too late for a donation." She turned and kept walking. Gregory spun toward Diane. His face was red. His hands were shaking. "Say something. Do something." Diane's mask cracked wide open. Her voice came out in a sharp hiss. "I told you not to make a scene, Gregory. I told you from the beginning, but you couldn't help yourself. You never can. Don't you dare put this on me. You called the police on the owner. You humiliated us in front of 300 people. I didn't know." "That's the point, Gregory. You didn't know and you didn't care. You saw a black woman and you decided she didn't belong. That's all you needed." Their voices carried across the terrace. Guests pretended not to hear. But everyone heard. Every single word. Sloane sat frozen in her chair. Her bouquet lay on the table, white petals scattered across the tablecloth like fallen teeth. Her makeup was ruined. Her wedding was over. And her father was standing 10 feet away, unraveling in front of everyone she'd ever known. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. Meanwhile, the phones were already out. A college friend of Sloane's had recorded the entire reveal from 2 tables away. Whitney placing the deed on the table, the words, "Every blade of grass," Gregory's face collapsing, all of it, crystal clear, perfect audio. She posted the clip before dessert was cleared. Caption: "The billionaire called the owner a crasher. I literally cannot." Within 30 minutes, it had 2,000 shares. Within an hour, it had 40,000. By midnight, every major news outlet in Virginia had the clip. By morning, it was national. The story was simple. The story was devastating. A wealthy white billionaire racially profiled the black owner of a historic estate, humiliated her in front of hundreds of guests, called the police and lied about her being aggressive, and then watched as she shut down his daughter's wedding with nothing but a property deed and a calm voice. No spin could fix it. No PR firm could soften it. The video spoke for itself. Gregory Caldwell stood on the emptying terrace as the staff packed away the tables and folded the white linens. The lanterns were dark. The string quartet was gone. The fountain had been turned off. The only sound was the crunch of gravel as guests loaded into their cars and drove away without saying goodbye. He stood there alone in his $10,000 suit, with his hands at his sides and his mouth open, and nothing, absolutely nothing, left to say. Across the property, in the stone cottage behind the magnolia trees, Whitney James sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. Her portfolio was closed. Her phone was off. Through the window, she could see the last headlights disappearing down the drive. The estate was going quiet again. The crickets were coming back. She took a slow sip and set the cup down. Tomorrow, her attorney would file the complaints. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. But tonight, Ashford Hall was hers again. Just hers. The way it was always meant to be. By 9 the next morning, Terrence Blake had already filed 3 documents. The first was a formal complaint against Officer Dale Wilkins with the county's Internal Affairs Division. The charge was straightforward. Wilkins conducted an unlawful stop and interrogation of a private citizen on her own property without probable cause. He acted solely on the word of a third party. He never verified ownership. He never contacted the estate's management. He asked to search Whitney's vehicle without legal justification. The complaint also noted the racial dimension. Whitney James was black. The complainant who called 911 was white. The description Gregory gave to dispatch, aggressive, hostile, refused to identify herself, was contradicted entirely by Wilkins' own body camera footage, which showed Whitney calm, cooperative, and polite from the first second to the last. The second filing was a civil rights complaint with the state's Human Rights Commission. Racial discrimination, harassment, false police report. The third was a civil lawsuit against Gregory Caldwell personally. Defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, filing a false police report, racial discrimination under Virginia state law. Terrence sent Whitney a text at 9:14 a.m. 3 words: "It's all filed." Whitney read it, set her phone down, poured another cup of tea. The legal machinery was moving now. But the court of public opinion was already in session. The video had exploded overnight. By Tuesday morning, it had been viewed over 12 million times across 4 platforms. Every clip started the same way. Whitney placing the deed on the table, her voice steady as stone. Every building, every acre, every blade of grass. The comment section was a wildfire. He called the owner a crasher. The owner. Her composure is superhuman. I would have lost it. This man called the cops and lied. That's a crime. She shut down a $250,000 wedding with a piece of paper and didn't even raise her voice. Legend. By Wednesday, investigative journalist Nina Sullivan had picked up the story. Nina was known for one thing: digging. And when she started digging into Gregory Caldwell, she found dirt that went down for miles. Her report aired Thursday evening. 12 minutes. Devastating. The piece revealed that Caldwell Capital Partners, Gregory's hedge fund, had faced 3 prior discrimination complaints from employees of color over the past decade. All 3 had been settled quietly. All 3 included non-disclosure agreements that prevented the former employees from speaking publicly. But Nina found them anyway. 2 agreed to speak on camera with their faces hidden and voices altered. Their stories were almost identical. Racial slurs in meetings. Promotions denied without explanation. a culture of silence enforced by legal threats. One former analyst said, "He didn't just tolerate racism, he ran his company on it. If you were black or brown, you had a ceiling. And if you complained, you had an NDA and a severance check." The second source added, "What happened to that woman at the wedding? That's Tuesday morning at Caldwell Capital. He just usually does it behind closed doors." Nina's report connected the dots. This wasn't a one-time incident. This was a pattern. A career built on the assumption that money could buy silence and power could erase accountability. The fallout was immediate. Thursday night, two major pension funds, one from New Jersey, one from Illinois, announced they were reviewing their investments in Caldwell Capital Partners. By Friday morning, both had formally initiated divestment procedures. 3 more institutional investors followed by the weekend. Combined, the exodus represented approximately $800 million in committed capital. The fund's quarterly report would later describe it as an unprecedented liquidity event driven by reputational concerns. Gregory's board of directors held an emergency meeting on Saturday, behind closed doors. No press, no statement. By Monday, the board had delivered an ultimatum: resign as managing partner voluntarily, or face a formal vote of no confidence. Gregory chose to resign. His statement was 4 sentences long. It mentioned personal reflection and family priorities. It did not mention Whitney James. It did not mention race. It did not contain the word sorry. Nobody was convinced. Meanwhile, Officer Dale Wilkins was facing his own reckoning. The internal affairs investigation moved quickly. Wilkins' body camera footage was the key piece of evidence. It showed everything: Whitney's calm demeanor, her clear identification of herself as a resident, her offer to show documentation, Gregory's aggressive interference, Wilkins' failure to verify any of Gregory's claims before treating Whitney as a suspect. The review board's findings were unanimous. Wilkins had violated department protocol on 4 separate counts: failure to establish probable cause, failure to independently verify a complaint, improper request to search a vehicle without consent or warrant, conduct unbecoming an officer. He was placed on administrative leave without pay. The county police department issued a public statement acknowledging serious procedural failures and announcing mandatory bias training for all officers, effective immediately. Wilkins did not contest the findings. Back in the civil courts, Gregory's legal team tried to make the lawsuit go away. They offered a settlement, then a bigger settlement, then a much bigger settlement. Terrence Blake rejected all 3. "My client isn't looking for a check, Mr. Caldwell. She's looking for accountability." The case moved toward trial. Discovery was brutal. Gregory's legal team was forced to turn over internal emails, text messages, and HR records from Caldwell Capital Partners. The pattern Nina Sullivan had reported was confirmed in black and white: discriminatory language in internal communications, suppressed complaints, retaliatory terminations. The judge allowed the prior complaints to be entered as evidence of pattern and practice. Gregory's attorneys recommended settling before trial. This time, the terms were different. Whitney's conditions were non-negotiable. A significant financial settlement, reported by multiple outlets to be in the low 8 figures. A written public apology from Gregory Caldwell, not drafted by his PR team, not reviewed by his lawyers, his own words, on camera, delivered publicly. Gregory had no leverage left. He accepted every condition. The apology was filmed in a conference room. No backdrop, no branding, just Gregory Caldwell sitting in a chair, looking 10 years older than he had at the wedding, reading from a single sheet of paper he'd written himself. His voice cracked twice. His hands trembled. He said he was wrong. He said he had let prejudice guide his actions. He said Whitney James deserved better. He did not say he was sorry for getting caught. But everyone heard it anyway. The video was posted publicly. The reaction was split. Some accepted it as genuine. Most saw it for what it was: a man who was sorry he lost, not sorry for what he did. Whitney watched the apology once. She never watched it again. 6 months later, Ashford Hall looked exactly the same, and completely different. The Georgian columns still caught the morning light. The gardens still bloomed in rows of white and violet. The lake still mirrored the Virginia sky like a sheet of glass. But now, when people drove through the iron gates, they knew the name of the woman who owned it. Whitney James didn't seek the spotlight. It found her anyway. After the story broke, booking requests for Ashford Hall tripled overnight. The 12-month waiting list became a 24-month waiting list. Event planners from New York to Atlanta called the estate the most talked-about venue in America. Whitney turned most of the interview requests down. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be effective. The settlement money went exactly where she promised it would. Every dollar. The Ashford Heritage Foundation launched in the fall with a single mission: scholarships for young black professionals pursuing careers in real estate, architecture, and historic preservation. The first class had 14 recipients. They came from 9 states. Whitney met every one of them personally on the front steps of the main house, the same terrace where Gregory Caldwell had called her a wedding crash. She shook their hands. She told them about Eleanor Ashford. She told them that ownership isn't just about property. It's about having a seat that nobody can take from you. She didn't cry, but Preston Moore did. He stood by the fountain in his pressed jacket with tears running down his weathered face, watching the kids walk the grounds like they belonged there. Because they did. Preston retired that winter. Whitney threw him a dinner in the ballroom, the one with the crystal chandeliers that catch the light like frozen rain. 30 years of service. She gave him a generous retirement package and a handwritten letter that said, "You were the only one who stood up when it counted. I will never forget that." He framed the letter. It hangs in his living room to this day. As for Gregory Caldwell, the man who once felt like he owned the world moved on without him. Caldwell Capital Partners was restructured under new leadership. His name was removed from the letterhead. His portrait was taken down from the lobby. Diane filed for divorce 3 months after the incident. The proceedings were private. The outcome was not. She kept the house in Connecticut. He kept the silence. Gregory retreated from public life entirely. No interviews, no appearances, no comeback tour. The last anyone heard, he was living in a rented townhouse in Maryland, alone. Sloane Caldwell reached out to Whitney 5 months after the wedding. A handwritten letter. No lawyers. No conditions. Just a young woman saying she was sorry for what her father did, and sorry for what she didn't do. Whitney read the letter at her kitchen table. She wrote back the same evening. She accepted the apology. She wished Sloane well. They didn't become friends, but the gesture mattered. Some doors don't need to open all the way. Sometimes a crack is enough. Officer Dale Wilkins completed his disciplinary review and was reassigned to desk duty. 6 months later, he gave a single interview to a local newspaper. He said he should have asked more questions before acting. He said the pressure from a powerful man clouded his judgment. He said he thinks about that night more than he'd like to admit. It was the most honest thing anyone on Gregory's side ever said. And Whitney? Whitney is still at Ashford Hall, still walking the grounds at golden hour, still checking the table settings before the big events, still driving her silver SUV down the gravel path with classical music on the radio and a thermos of black coffee on the passenger seat. The terrace where Gregory humiliated her now hosts the foundation's annual fundraiser every September. Last year, 200 guests attended. They drank Virginia wine and watched the sun set over the lake and listened to Whitney give a 5-minute speech about belonging. She didn't mention Gregory's name. She didn't need to.